I want to welcome on my next guest. We have Gregg Rosenthal from the Around the NFL podcast, NFL Network, NFL.com. You see him everywhere. Greg, how's everything going?
What is going on?
Not much. I don't know how this season's going to function with no Devin Funchess because I haven't had a season like that in a very long time, and I can't wait till he gets back.
Wow, you're just Zach starting off with a big Devin Funchess joke just out of nowhere. Is that like what the show's all about? Just a bunch of Devin Funchess jokes?
I used to say I was rolling with the Funchess. I thought he was gonna have a big year right after Carolina traded Kelvin Benjamin, and then he just didn't, and then he went to Indy, and then the guy got hurt, and then he was in Green Bay, and now we have a pandemic, and now he's not playing. So it's interesting, but I'm excited for the NFL season. Are you cautiously optimistic because it's weird this year?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I'm looking forward to storylines that aren't the pandemic. And I don't think we're there yet. And I don't think we're really going to get there totally, all season. But it will be a different change of pace when the teams get back on the field. And I also think it'll be more telling from is this really going to work perspective once they start playing football, because, there's so much being put into keeping the players safe and 6 feet apart and everything. It's like, well, then they have to go play football for 3 hours on Sunday and practice. And I think that's kind of the test. Obviously, if everyone is safe and healthy, then they can't transmit it. But I think it's unrealistic to expect that to happen perfectly.
Yeah, I think all these facilities, all the measures they're taking with the spritzing and the this and that and the spacing out, everything, I'm not concerned about. The safeties are going to take every precaution. I think it's what happens when the players go home and are around people that you don't know where they've been, and that they can't account for.
Well, right, and just whether the country is going to be in better shape. That's what I've been saying since May or June, and the NFL, and the Players Association kind of solved a lot of their issues pretty well, pretty amicably. Yeah. That, okay, they've solved their issues. I think they're going to try to do it as safe as they can. The bubble was never going to happen. But if the country remains a mess, like at a similar level to what it is now, like there's no avoiding it. It's like people getting mad at the baseball players in the bubble for going out and then catching it, which I get, okay. Yeah. But it's like maybe save a little bit of that anger for that it's that easy to go catch it that you go out once. Because, until we're at a point that that's not the case, it's just unrealistic when there's how many players in the league once we get it, cut the rosters down. It's 2,300 right now, and then once the rosters are cut down, I think, it's over 1,500, and the practice squads are bigger. So until the country gets it settled, or not settled, but just in a better position, it's hard to expect any business to really operate the same way.
Until you're not seeing any more of these people fighting Walmart employees about not going in with that masks. It's not going to, that's step one. That's, I don't know. Right. That's step one. So that's how the country's kind of really taking it seriously. Watch out for people at Walmart. No, but you said there was no chance of doing a bubble. I get that, structurally with all the players, it's not feasible. Would 32 individual bubbles like base camps, you think that could work?
Well, the Saints are doing something similar right now. They're in a hotel in New Orleans. I think it could work, but I'm not an expert. There are risks, I think, associated with that. Yeah. I think one of the things with the NFL, how it's different than the NBA and the NHL, number one, they don't have to travel as much. There's only 8 trips all year. Number two, those two leagues were coming together for the playoffs. Yeah. They weren't asking the NBA players to do it for 6 months. Now they might ask the NBA players to do it again. Yeah. I'm very curious how that's going to work, whether they'll break it up. Because I think you see with the NBA right now, it's great. I don't think you miss the fans. The product's great. And I think they're going to get through it, and it's fun. I don't think that was ever realistic because the NFL wants to have a full season. Yeah. I also think the NFL was making decisions at a time when they were overly optimistic about what the world would look like in August, which really wasn't that overly optimistic if you think about it, because basically every other wealthy country in the world has it in a shape that was where the NFL owners probably expected it. Like we are kind of on our own here and struggling with it this much, at least in terms of the type of countries that have this level of resources.
Yeah, no, because you see countries around the world. I know you see the Premier League going off without a hitch to get stuff. New Zealand going.
I mean,
on.
Germany. I think about like Japan and Germany, which they're running their sports league. It is a major story. It is an emergency when suddenly they had a couple hundred cases in a day. Yeah. It's like that's happening in Florida by
the hour,
8 a.m. Yeah. Right. I mean, more than that. I mean, it's every second, and so we're just in a different place.
Do you think some players might be hesitant to play certain away games if they're going into a hotspot?
No, I don't think a player, if they get to that point of the season that they're traveling and they've gone through everything, is going to be worried about that as much. Because I think they're going to they're going to go in for a day. Maybe they'll stay at a hotel one night. And I don't think that's like the number one reason why they would be scared. I think it, it's living in the community. It's playing football, wherever it is. I think that's probably the player's number one concern.
Do you think there's any chance they push back the season just to get more kind of paperwork done?
I have no greater insight than you. So I get the answer would be yes. I think that's possible because everything's possible.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't expecting to postpone the Hall of Fame game. That would have been today, the day we tape it, Thursday. They wanted to do the preseason. They cut it down to 2, and then they negotiated 1, and that's gone. And so I think it's possible, and it's been reported in many places, how they've built kind of an extra 3 weeks of flexibility into the season. I do know teams are preparing, or the league is preparing for every possibility, and certainly that's one, but I don't think there's any major concern right as we speak that's going to happen.
Because I think cases are going to come up, but I think they're hoping that it comes up early, that they can get a handle on it and figure out how to do it, because this is unprecedented territory. They've never had to deal with anything like this before.
Of course, no one that's alive has, and that's why I even though I work for the league, so it feels like it's like I don't want to be seen as like a company guy, but I really felt this about baseball too. That I get the criticism directed at the sports league, but to me, it's just it's such a small part of the greater societal problem. If you really want to get angry at something, that's to me it. And I don't think the teams know until they get on the field. I think what we've seen so far is over 100 players have gone onto the COVID-19 list. Not all of them have tested positive. Some have just come in contact with someone that has, but the majority of those were positive tests. 50 of the 100 have already come off the list. Okay. Many, including all the ones I think that, were near someone that had tested positive. And it's still happening though on a daily basis. I think, as we speak Tuesday, I think there was 8 or 9 players went on today, and 5 or 6 were on the same team, the Dolphins. And when you think about, if that happens during the season, that is going to be trickier. I think if that happens from August 17th on, when they're practicing in pads, that's going to be the real test. It's about a 3-week period between that and when the season starts. And I think that's what the NFL is really going to be looking at as their test case. And if test positives go up a ton in that first week or 2, then you have to start thinking about adjusting.
Do you think it's possible if they say, a 16-week season is not feasible plus playoffs, you think they would cut it down and just say like maybe the 12-week mark? Okay, 1 more week and then we're going right to playoffs.
I think they're going to try to avoid that as much as humanly possible because of the money involved. But there certainly are scenarios they could be forced to do that. Now, if they get 12 weeks in, to me, they're going through. I can't imagine something would happen after 12 weeks that wouldn't have happened already. But then again, predicting this thing is sick.
Yeah, well, once you go through, like, if you have to go through multiple quarterbacks, whether for injury or COVID, Josh Johnson's always available because the Washington did that a couple of years ago. We went through Alex Smith and Colt McCoy in back-to-back weeks. Mark Sanchez had a nice handoff to Adrian Peterson who took it to the house. And then Josh Johnson won us a game that kind of hurt the draft spot. I wasn't too happy about that.
He was going to be in the XFL.
Yeah.
He was in the – was he in the XFL? He was.
I think he might have been. Man, that feels like so long ago. The XFL, like, oh my, with the cup snake within
All those
DC.
players got signed. People
I know.
like Philip Walker, the
Yeah.
Panthers' backup
Yeah.
quarterback, as the
Definitely.
third string quarterback.
Definitely.
I was at Colts camp a couple of years ago, and Philip Walker, I just remember him from that day because it was the worst offensive practice I've ever seen. And I talked to Colts reporters there, and they said it was like that every day. And we did the count. They were under 40% completion on a non-padded practice, which is just like unforeseen. And it wasn't because the quarterbacks were terrible, which they are, but I mean, they're still professionals. It's more that like the defense was so much better than the offense. This was the Andrew Luck
Wow.
before they traded for Jacoby Brissett. But yeah,
Who
I
was
know
who was the backup?
Tolzien was there, Philip Walker, but who was
Wow.
I'm forgetting who the starter was, so I apologize.
Hasselbeck? Hasselbeck?
I'm gonna look it up. No.
No, not Hasselbeck. I have no idea. That's why. That's interesting.
He started week 1. Just go on, and I'll tell you in about 1 second.
Yeah. No, yeah. No.
It was Tolzien was the starter.
Okay. That's interesting.
But I'm forgetting. Yeah, and Walker was the third string. I forget who was second.
That's interesting. I feel like that's the kind of like statistic, the completion percentage you don't want made public in a non-padded.
No,
practice.
It was tough. I was doing a feature on Frank Gore.
Oh wow!
He knew he was throwing a season away there.
Yeah, that's incredible. And then speaking football-wise, you got everything else on the side. Which teams are you excited to see this year that maybe people aren't talking about?
It's funny just because the Panthers are on my mind because we just mentioned them. I really am. They're one of the sneaky. If I should do this as an article, maybe like kind of bad teams that I'm excited to watch. I'm not they're not going to be good. Their defense is going to be terrible, but I'm intrigued what Matt Rule and Joe Brady, their offensive coordinator, are going to do. I've always thought Teddy Bridgewater could work in the right system, and I think this will be it. And I think their receivers are pretty great, are pretty fun. Curtis Samuel is a fun, like kind of number 3, which is what he is now. He can make a lot of plays after the catch. Robbie Anderson played great for the Jets down the stretch last year. DJ Moore is a legit 1,000-yard-a-year receiver. And then you have McCaffrey catching passes, and it's kind of like this spread offense. And their defense is going to be terrible, maybe the worst defense in the NFL. So I kind of think for fantasy, like Teddy's going to be throwing the ball 50 times a game. And so I'm curious because Brady didn't get a lot of pop, I feel like, for what he did at LSU. But, I mean, the results speak for themselves, and I'm kind of curious to see how that translates.
Do you think that would be the worst defense in football?
Well, they'll have the youngest. They should be the youngest defense. Now, they have K'Wan Short and Shaq Thompson.
Derek
Brown, who they drafted. But I think they're going to have about 8 new starters. They weren't very good last year, and they lost most of their good players, including Luke Kuechly and most of their secondary. The cornerback position is as bad as anyone in the league. Maybe Burns and Short and Thompson. I mean, you got some players there, but you also have a first-time coordinator on that side of the ball too. 8 new starters. They drafted 7 rookie. It just feels like they're a team that could have really used an offseason and a real training camp.
What do you think their ceiling is?
Oh, like 7 wins. Wow. I feel like any team could always win 7 games.
Even Washington?
Oh, always.
Really?
I mean, Miami going into last year was as bad a roster as I've ever seen, and they won 5 games. It's one of the dumbest football cliches ever. Is like it's one of the hardest things to do in sports is win a game in the NFL. Nope, it's actually exactly as easy as every other sport. One team wins every single game, and there's really just not. The players are so good that even the worst team, there's not as big of a gap between 4-12 and like 10-6 as people think. I mean, so you can be a pretty bad team and win 10 games, and you could be a pretty good team and wind up only getting about 4 or 5 wins.
Who's a team on the opposite spectrum that we're hyping up a lot, but you expect to be this year's Browns?
Ooh, I mean, you're just making me pick out of the air. Are people hyping up the Seahawks? Probably not at this point.
I mean, good.
You know what? I don't think the logical case for it is totally there. But I do worry about the 49ers.
Really?
I think you look at the roster and there's continuity, and that should help this year. But just teams that improve that much from one year to the next historically, especially on defense, which tends to be less consistent, they just bounce, they fall back a little bit. That's just usually how it goes. I think the receiver position is quite weak with Deebo Samuel hurt. You're asking
You
a
got
lot out of
Ayuk,
Kyle
Ayuk,
Shanahan.
Ayuk from where'd he go? Arizona State.
I'm from Massachusetts. Oh, who?
Kyle Ayuk or Brandon Ayuk.
Oh, Ayuk. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
I personally wasn't like too huge on him. He was probably like my least favorite of the top guys.
Oh,
But then again, Kyle Shanahan loves him, and I'm not really going to doubt his ability to draft yards after catch guys. But with the schedule and everything, I think they're kind of one team that, because of Garoppolo, who I'm not totally convinced in, that I would throw in that mix.
Jordan Reed over under 700 yards.
Oh, way under. I mean, on with George Kittle on his team, and you're right. And maybe he's their second receiver. I mean, that's possible.
Yeah, interesting. And who's a rookie you think people aren't talking about enough of? Or first round rookie. Let's narrow it down. First round pick that people are really not talking about.
I'm like scrolling through names with these open-ended questions. I always like. There's too many. Yeah. I don't know. I need to look at the list.
Yeah. What about the rookie quarterbacks? Who are you expecting to see? Who do you think could surprise people the most?
Well, I don't think anyone but Burrow is going to play for a while. I think Tua, if the Dolphins are as bad as they should be, will play. The second-year players, I think, could surprise, though. Like Daniel Jones, I think, could be better than people expect. I liked what I saw out of him. If the Broncos' offense wasn't changing, I like Drew Lock. I liked how he played at the end of the year.
What about in DC? What are you expecting from Haskins?
I like Scott Turner. In theory, I like some of the things Haskins does well, which is what like you used to look for out of quarterbacks, which is like he goes through his reads pretty well. He can anticipate a little bit. He's a true pocket passer. He's got some pretty nice touch. But the history of guys with numbers that bad as rookies, and then you have to change your offense, and it's not a great group around him. You don't really have a left tackle. It's just it's asking a lot.
Sadiq Charles,
that's a fourth round. It's a fourth round pick there. You're asking a lot. I have hopes for him, but it's asking a lot.
What's their ceiling? Everything goes right.
9 wins.
Really? Wow. I thought you were going to say like 5. No, that's interesting. Do you think there's going to be a new quarterback in DC next year?
I mean, I would say that for almost. I think people going into seasons are always way too confident that they have any idea of what's going to happen. It happens all the time that, teams can win 8 games that don't look very good. Here's why with Washington, though. I don't think they're like the worst team coming into a season that I've seen. In fact, I don't think they're that close to being the worst team this year. I think the Jets probably are worse. I think the Dolphins are worse, their roster. The Jaguars, maybe. Yeah. You're getting Scott Turner. You're getting a professional coach in Ron Rivera, and you have a great front seven on defense. Yeah. I mean, it really could be a top 6, 7 front seven in the entire NFL. And that's only if Chase Young is as good as he might be, maybe it's even better than that. So you have a bit of a foundation, and then you're hoping that the offense can just be passable. You have some options to run the ball. You have Scary Terry. It's a bad division, I think. I'm not really buying that the Eagles and Cowboys are like near the top of the NFC. The Giants are pretty bad. So I think you could get that first year coach magic and win 8-9 games. I mean, that would be a high ceiling, but that'd be their ceiling.
I need Darrell Green to come back. Gibbs can kind of assist a little bit.
The secondary's rough. The secondary is pretty rough. Are you a Redskins fan? You must be, because no one asked.
I used to be a Redskins fan. Now I'm a Washington football fan.
Right. My bad.
Yeah. So
gotta get used to that.
What would be your pick for the new name? Like if they said, "Hey, we want you to decide."
Well, I have thought about that. They might just stick with Washington football team if this scenario that I just laid out happens. If they made the playoffs with this team, don't you think they'll just keep it? And the uniforms look great. I think they're cool. I don't like the idea of like touchdown football team, but otherwise, I don't know. You could do worse.
I thought that Red Wolves was getting a lot of hype. Fine with that. Red Tails is getting a lot of hype. Fine with that. to my pick, which will never happen, is the Wolf Blitzers. So he could be the mascot. He could be on the jerseys.
I don't really see. Yeah, I think the only reason people were going to the Red Wolves was to keep the red.
Yeah.
So then you're kind of losing that with the Wolf Blitzer. But if you use him as the mascot, he does have the red beard. So
yeah, they're the Red Wolf Blitzers. I don't know. It's interesting. It's wild. So are you more nervous than excited about the season, or are you kind of ready to see what they have? Because I feel like they've had all this time to prepare. They have contingencies if stuff doesn't go according to plan.
No, I'm just waiting. I'm a little anxious about it in general, partly because then at the same time, this is all going to crank up. I still am, having to deal with two kids that aren't going to be going to school like a lot of working parents, and so suddenly, I've been in the off season during all this, and we're busy and we're doing 3 shows a week and this and that, but it's not the same as the season. Suddenly, I'm going to have the kids in the house; they're not going to school, and whether it goes well or not, it's going to be a lot. And it just feels like it's going to be a lot. So I'm anxious because I want to see it. I want to see it starting. I want to see it happening. I want to start talking about football.
You can have them be like your scouts.
Right. Oh, they'll be watching. This will be the first Sundays, I've been at home since they've been born. And the first Sundays I've been at home, I don't know, like 16 or 17 years.
Yeah. For like mathematics, you could say, all right, how many yards did Henry Ruggs have against?
I mean, they, to their credit, they couldn't watch any more football than they already do.
Oh, really? That's awesome. That's awesome.
They're pretty into it.
That's awesome. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat. I know you're really busy, especially everybody running around the league, everybody sitting out.
I never gave you that rookie though. I just couldn't think of one off the top of my head. Here's one.
Let's see.
I've talked to people who really do think Jeff Okudah is like the best cornerback. I'm sure people are talking about him, but it's not like he gets a lot of national. That he's as good a cornerback prospect and could come in the league as good as a cornerback, which is a tough position to transition as anyone since like Patrick Peterson. So he's someone I'm curious because here's another team to answer your question on like the sneaky fun teams. I'm into the Lions this year. I kind of want to see what they do. I think they have a fun group of offensive players that were playing really well in Darren Bevel's system last year. Stafford. Now you add DeAndre Swift to the mix. If Kerryon Johnson's healthy, he's a nice backup. I always loved Marvin Jones and Galladay and Amendola. Hawkinson is in second year. So if the defense is just passable, give those Lions fans something to root for. And if Okudah is as good as some people have really told me he is, they could be kind of fun. They could be a playoff type of team.
Do you think they'll make him the number 1 corner or keep it fun for the time being?
They're a team that's probably not – they're going to play a lot of man, and they're not going to travel anyways. They're not the type of – they're going to be like the Patriots where they're on sides for the most part. And, so Trufant, I think, played a little bit better than some of the metrics show. I'm trusting my eyes there a little bit compared to the numbers. But that's not a bad starting cornerback group, even though they lost Slay. I think they look pretty good on paper, at least on offense.
Plus, you can have David Blau doing magic tricks to try to throw off the opposing defense, and then Kenny Galladay can just take it to the house. So
you should have started with the Blau bit,
Yeah, I just thought
Blau material is stronger.
I know. That'd be incredible. Like if they trick plays with him, and all of a sudden like throws king of clubs, and then all of a sudden it's like that. No,
he's someone I like keep. I sort. I've been doing these articles on young quarterbacks, and like you sort by qualifiers on PFF, and like he'll just show up on these lists because there's only 39 people who like threw enough throws last year to qualify, and he's one of them. And you're just like, oh yeah, I forgot about David Blau. He'll like show up on some weird lists as like he had the highest or the second or third highest percentage of deep throws in the league, and I was like, what was happening there in Detroit?
Do you think Galladay is ready to be that number 1 guy? Do you think he's like?
I think he is one. Yeah, I think he played like one last year. And if Stafford hadn't gotten hurt, I think they would have had monster numbers. They had monster numbers quietly the first 6 weeks of the season. Yeah, and then you got Marvin Jones always just kind of out of nowhere. It's a 3-touchdown game every time. Yeah, and it's gonna be interesting. Hawkinson with everything going on, but this has been a lot of fun. And it's for people that for people that are not already following you on social media. How can they find you? At Gregg Rosenthal, the Around the NFL podcast. Check it out. All right, cool, man. This has been a lot of fun. I'm excited for the season. I can't watch any more Korean baseball. I'm out.
I'm out.
I mean, we got the NBA now. It
I
has been
know.
nice. It has
Yeah,
been nice having the NBA back.
but they've already got the guys that are already starting to sit out now, and I'm like, all right,
Right. Well, these are preseason
I
games
know.
until the playoffs start.
Yeah,
We got
and
a
the
week and a
Wizards
half
are in,
left.
which is incredible because like I don't think I think if you polled 22 of the teams and you asked them all the teams in the East are here, I guarantee you not all of them would say Washington because people are
Right.
like, oh, they're
Well,
here.
one of my favorite little stats is Washington. The Wizards have fallen behind one of the teams in the
Yeah,
standings that
they're
are not
behind
in the
Charlotte.
bubble.
Yeah, yeah, which is honestly Charlotte should be like, all right, come on, no, it's wild. It's gone better than expected. I'm glad it's doing well, and I hope it just carries out and it's as good as it has been. But yeah, but this has been a lot of fun, man. I wanted to thank you again.
Thanks, Zach.